All right. Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I am here with Vance Morris. Vance, welcome. So awesome to have you on the show today.
I appreciate it, Kevin. We're gonna have a little fun today, I think.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. And this is kind of cool because I always, start off by giving a shout out to the person that connected me with the person that I'm interviewing. And today it's kind of two people because this goes way, Vance, we're going to date ourselves a little bit because this goes way back. You and I originally met in Dan Kennedy's world years ago.
Many
And
moons.
and I mean, I met Dan Kennedy through Joe Polish. I owned a cleaning and restoration business back in the 90s. And I got tied in with Joe, and Joe was helping me, do better marketing in that business. And I went to one of his live events, and Dan Kennedy spoke there. And I invested in Dan's magnetic marketing system as a result of that, and got on Dan's newsletter list. And it was in November or sometime in 1999. I went to my first Dan Kennedy seminar, and that was, I remember he used to hold them at the Embassy Suites on Camelback in Phoenix, Arizona, is where he held those events a lot of the time. And those were pretty amazing events. It was Dan and the audience in a room for 3 days, and it was like start at 8 in the morning and go till 11 at night sometimes. And
Yep.
Dan was always like, y'all can sleep when you get home. So, but it was, and the kind and caliber of people in those rooms. I mean, just phenomenal. And you look at where those people are at today. I mean, they're business icons. And you and I met way back when, and then we got recently reconnected via Michael DeLon, and Michael runs a publishing company. He helps entrepreneurs who want to be authors. He helps them get their books written and published and out into the marketplace, and helps them use those books to market their business effectively and stuff. And Michael and I met back in 2019. And then he recently reconnected you and I because him and I did an interview for the podcast. And he's like, Kev, you need to interview Vance for your podcast. And I'm like, I know Vance. I haven't talked to him in years, but I remember Vance. And so
Exactly.
here we are. What were you saying, Vance?
No, I said exactly. I was agreeing with you. Yeah, it
Yeah.
has been a number of years.
It has been. It has been. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation. Yeah, you and I have already been talking a little bit. We've been on a couple calls together, and so I've got an update on what you're doing these days. And but I want to kind of start off by turning it over to you. I want to set a little bit of context here and give our listeners an idea about who you are and what you're all about. And so why don't we start by sharing, what you do, who you serve, what inspires you most about the work you're doing, Vance, and the impact you're making in the world. And maybe if you're so inclined, share some of the backstory into how you even got into doing what you do.
Oh, sure. And maybe I'll start with the backstory because
Absolutely.
everything else will make sense from there.
Okay.
Uh, Out of college, I worked for the Disney Company
Yep.
down in Orlando for 10 years, and it was a great experience. Certainly set the stage for everything that I was going to do in my professional life moving forward. And everybody says, well, what was the biggest lesson you got at Disney? And they all expect an answer like, oh, customer service, customer experience. And it really wasn't any of those. I mean, those are important, and I certainly picked up a lot on that. But it was that Disney runs on systems and processes. And that was really, I mean, it blew my mind. Now, this is back in the early 90s. So before everybody had a computer, there certainly weren't cell phones then. And we were opening up the Yacht and Beach Resort. This is during first Desert Storm.
Okay.
Um, and we walked into this ballroom, and I mean, it's just 5 feet tall, row after row of binders. And I'm like, what in the hell are all these binders? And my boss said, well, these are all of the OJTs and SOPs for how Disney opens and runs a resort. I'm like, holy cannoli. I mean, they have a process for everything. You want to change a bus tire, they got a process for it. You want to carry a tray in a restaurant, they got it documented. I mean, everything. Um, and what I learned from that was that having a system or a process gives you freedom.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't shackle you. It actually, quite frankly, does the opposite and gives you freedom. For an hourly employee, once you know the system, you actually, it's just like muscle memory. You just kind of just do it by rote. I mean, it's just, okay, got to get it done, got to get it done. And that allows you a certain amount of freedom to do all of the nice little magical things that Disney cast members are known for. Because if you're always thinking about doing your job, well, you won't have time to do nice stuff for anybody else.
Yeah.
So that kind of made a lot of sense to me from a Disney perspective. Now, as an entrepreneur, knowing that I had to put systems and processes in place in my businesses, the kind of freedom it gives me is I don't have to be in the business every day. So, I mean, I've got 3 home service businesses that I have a general manager who runs those. I don't have to be, actually, honestly, I can't tell you the last time I was actually in the business. I dropped by a couple of weeks ago to drop some supplies off, but that was it. So those processes give me the freedom to come and go as I please with those businesses. And I think that was just like the biggest lesson I got from Disney was that. Um, so we fast forward to today. I still own those 3 home service businesses. I had them for, gosh, about 17 years now.
Okay.
Um, and right about 4 or 5 years into it, people started asking me because it didn't look like I was working very hard. And quite frankly, I wasn't. Um, uh, I said, well, how are you doing this? I mean, you don't look like you're working hard. You look like you're doing okay for yourself. Can you show me what you're doing? So I started coaching people. And that grew into actually taking people to Disney for full immersion boot camps.
Okay.
So I now take business groups down to Disney for 3 and 4 day full immersion boot camps where we spend half the day in the classroom and half the day in the theme parks, and we see how Disney makes the sausage, so to speak. But the key thing, and this is my primary job on these, is, a lot of people will complain, oh, I don't have a Cinderella castle or I don't have a roller coaster. Why should I copy what Disney's doing? And it's not about copying what Disney's doing. It's about adapting what Disney is doing into your industry. And I've taken every industry under the sun. I mean, I've had orthodontists, I've had financial planners, I've had childcare center owners, carpet cleaners, you name it. I've taken them down there. And we've always found a way to take the strategies that Disney is using in their customer experience and their attention to detail and figured out a way to adapt it to a completely different niche or industry.
Yeah.
And that's what, I mean, I'm sure you've heard Kennedy tell the story about, how did, the drive-throughs come about, for like McDonald's
Yeah.
drive-through and things like
Yeah.
that. I always remember the stories. Probably, one of the managers from McDonald's was sitting in line at a bank,
Yep.
and they put the money in that little tube, and whoosh, off it goes. And the manager was probably thinking to me, "Oh, how do I put a milkshake in one of those?"
Yeah.
You know. And so they took the drive-through concept from banking and put it into fast food. So a
Uh-huh.
lot of the innovations and stuff, you got to look outside of your business.
Yeah.
So my business, really, the consulting business is continued to grow. It's called Deliver Service Now Institute. If you make an acronym out of that, it spells Disney. Took me a long time to come up with that, so huge
Nice.
pat on my back. Um, it is a lifestyle business. I have no employees. I don't plan on getting any because this is just the way I want to do it. And when it's time for me to exit, I will just turn the lights off and be done with it.
Mhm.
The cool thing about this, though, is that it uses a lot of my creative juices. I have always been build it and then let somebody else run it.
Okay.
I did that. Most of my career at Disney was designing and building the restaurants and the attractions, and then moving on to something else and letting somebody else run it. I've done that throughout my entire career. I had a couple of corporate jobs. And then obviously I did that with my home service businesses. And so now I get to do it every day with different businesses. I mean, I got a luxury shampoo manufacturer. I've got a coach to doggy daycare centers. I've got financial planners. I got an attorney who likes to fight with the IRS. I got all these varying clients, and we get to come up with these really cool ways to provide customer experiences for their clients and then figure out how we can monetize them. I mean, they are masters at extracting money from your wallet and leaving you feel happy about it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then getting you to come back and do it all over again. Right.
You
So
bet.
that's what I show people is how do we create an experience for your customer? Of course, delivering tremendous value.
Mhm.
How do you engage in that price elasticity? How do you increase your prices so that it matches that value? And once you've accomplished that, it sets the stage for customer retention and getting people to come back to you again and again and again. And so that's really the two areas that I focus on in my business are, I don't do lead generation and I don't do Google pay per click or any of that stuff. I focus on, okay, you got the client. How do we onboard them? How does that experience look? How does the experience of using your product or experiencing your service look? And then most importantly, how do you retain the customer? Because that's where most business owners drop the ball. They put all this money into marketing on the front end.
Uh-huh.
Like I'll ask most of my clients, and I would say 9.9 out of 10. I'll say, do you have a marketing budget? And they'll say yes. And then I'll ask them, do you have a customer retention budget? And that it's 0.1%
Yeah.
will say yes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but you got to fix that
Mhm.
because it's just ridiculous. I mean, it's so much more expensive to get a new customer than it is to maintain one that you've already gotten.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so that's kind of where I am. There's a little of the backstory. I mean, I've worked for some larger companies, consulted to some larger companies, rocket ship companies like NASA. I was
Very
catering
cool.
director for the Smithsonian Museum System. So I've worked with some big stuff. And today, I mean, I work with a lot of solopreneurs, and they both present their challenges. And actually, quite frankly, prefer the solopreneurs because there's no political BS or HR BS to have to
Uh-huh.
wade through to affect change.
A lot less red tape, right?
Oh, certainly, certainly. Um,
Yeah.
so there you have
Yeah.
it. I have unpacked Vance in 5 minutes or less.
Yeah, you did great. And how cool is it that your job is essentially to go hang out at Disney World and stuff, and take other people along with you. That's pretty cool in my book.
Not a bad way to make a buck.
Not a bad way. Not a bad way at all. Yeah, I'll tell you, I've never been to Disney World, but we've been to Disneyland and what's the park right next to it? California Adventure. We love going to those parks and stuff. And I'll tell you, man, they just keep on the Star Wars rides that they got there now. Man, I'll tell you what an awesome experience. And
Yep.
they go all out on creating experience. And even the characters that they got walking around in the Star Wars area. I mean, man, I'm walking through there with my son Brock, and this character, he walks right by us on the left, and he's in front of us now, and he sees somebody up ahead, and all of a sudden he stops, he turns around and brings us over to the side, and he's like, be careful, be careful. And he starts to point to somebody, and he's like, acting like he's protecting us from this other villain and stuff. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, man, they just go all out,
But
on
we can do that in our businesses,
yeah, yeah,
and it's what I call performing your role.
yeah,
So if you change your mindset about how you approach a job, and instead of having it be a job, have it be performing a role in your show, then you can do those kinds of things. We all need to. So I wrote a couple of books, and one of the chapters in my book, Systematic Magic, is all about creating an environment. Now, not Greenpeace and Save the Whales, but creating an environment that is going to be able to deliver the experience
Yep.
and one that is conducive to sales. So at Disney, for example, I mean, once you're in Disney, you are fully immersed in their
Yes.
world. You
Yes.
can't compare prices to anything else because, well, all you got in front of you is Disney stuff. So you can't compare it to the outside. And that's the way Disney wants it.
Yep.
Now, for my carpet cleaning business, when we go to somebody's home, I consider that a hostile sales territory because we're going into somebody's kitchen and that's their home turf, right? I mean, they own it. Now we got to go in there and try to sell. So we try to make it our environment. So we take over the kitchen table or the kitchen counter, and we've got, our bottles of spot remover, and we play a little video, and we set up a box over here, and we spread some paper. So now we're at least trying to make this little corner our environment and try to get them focused on that so that the rest of the stuff kind of melts away. If you have an office or if you have a store or bricks and mortar, you're steps ahead of us because, well, it's yours and you can create that environment. Um, so creating that is really, really important if you want to have, eliminate that, what do we call it? The sales prevention department.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really just pulling that full environment together because you have the ability to do it. It's just how do you choreograph it? And then how do you get your employees to perform the role in your show?
Yeah. That's really powerful stuff right there because you are right. We are in complete control of the environment that we create and stuff, and we can we can control so much stuff. I mean, I think back to the days when I was running the publishing company and I did almost 500 strategic partnerships over a 12-year period. And I was really appreciative of all those partners because without them, my business would not have been growing the way that it was. And so I just treated my partners really good. And I wanted to give them an amazing experience in partnering with me, regardless of how much revenue we created together. I wanted to create an amazing experience. And so I figured out how to do that. And in fact, the first one of my early partners was probably somebody Do you know Mike Crow by chance? Mike
Oh God,
Crow?
yeah, he's in my
Yeah.
mastermind.
Okay, okay. So Mike was one of my early partners, and Mike he worked with home inspectors, teaching them how to better market their business. And him and I did a teleseminar years ago, and I offered my product to his folks, and we did really well. In fact, if I remember right, we did about $48,000 in sales from that teleseminar that we did. And I had agreed to give Mike a percentage of that. And so I got and the product, it was offered at $1,191, but it was 3 monthly installments of $397. So we
Right.
had all these installments of $397 that had come in. And I'm like, if I were Mike, I would really appreciate getting paid quickly. And so I'm just going to overnight him a check based on what just came in here. And if we get any returns or refunds or whatever, it'll just come out in the wash because we'll get, more installments coming in 30 days and 60 days. And so I write him a check. I write him a handwritten note. I put it into an overnight envelope and I send it to him and stuff. And on the note, I was just saying, hey, Mike, man, I really appreciated doing this project with you. It was a great experience. And here's your first check. There'll be two more coming, one in 30 days, one in 60 days. And just sent that off to him. And he ended up calling me the next day. And he was completely beside himself because no one had ever done that before. He's like, Kevin, I have never received an overnighted check from anybody before. And he's like, you made such an impression. He's like, in fact, the whole experience with you was so impressive. He's like, I want to connect you with some other people because I know that they would really appreciate partnering with you as well and stuff. And just little stuff. I mean, stuff like when Mike and I set that project up and we chose the date that we were going to do it. And I told him, I said, okay, well, I said, we'll have the promo materials to you a week in advance. And knowing full well that I sent those promo materials to him almost 2 weeks in advance. So that when he got him, I mean, we didn't talk about this, but he's certainly got to be thinking, well, man, Kevin sent it even earlier than he told me he would. So it just kind of started the project off from the standpoint of Kevin's doing more than what he said he was going to do. He's
Yep.
over delivering. And like you said, Vance, we get to create that. We can intentionally over deliver and just bake that into what we do. And it's as simple as saying, I'm going to deliver by this date and deliver 4 days before that, over deliver. And we can set
Yep.
that in. We can bake that in and just over deliver every single time with everybody and give them a great experience. And
And
so,
then word gets out, that you are somebody people should do business with.
yeah,
Not maybe not the specifics of how you did it, overnighting checks or being early on stuff, but you now have a reputation of being somebody worthy of having a partnership with.
yeah. And it's that experience is what gets them
Yeah.
talking. And so, yeah, yeah, powerful stuff. Well, now that we've got a little context set, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. And I'm going to reiterate the question around relationships for the benefit of our listeners. So, Vance, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons who completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
Well, you and I hit the same guy the same way.
Okay. Yep.
So I started a carpet cleaning business, as from what I understand, you did as well in restoration.
Yep.
Um, and so I found Joe Polish, who
Uh-huh.
was the guru to carpet cleaners.
Yep.
And Joe just kept talking about this guy, Dan.
Yeah.
Dan this,
Yeah.
Dan that, Dan this, Dan that. And I looked at Joe and I said, dude, I'm sorry, but I'm tired of listening to the middleman. I'm going to go find this Dan guy, and the heck with you. So I went to find the prophet at the top of the mountain. So I found Dan Kennedy. And it was like finding the guy that
Yeah.
I had been looking for years. The person who understood me, and not personally, but understood. I mean, there were thousands of me's in the
Yeah.
audience. Everybody just like me, entrepreneurs. We're all a little bit nuts. We're all a little bit ADD. We're all into this direct response marketing. How to stand out, how to be different, and then I learned about this information marketing stuff and this coaching and consulting. And I'm just like, this is just absolutely amazing. And if I hadn't, so it started with Joe. He had a contest, Better Your Best contest, and I had to
Yep.
get up and give a 5-minute presentation, which that's fine with me. I used to play in a rock band, so getting up on stage was nothing for me. So did that, didn't win, but got on stage. And then I started following Dan and went to his events, and finally, he would have contests, and I would submit my ads or marketing stuff to Dan, and I would win some of these things. And usually the prize was, a 15 or 30-minute sit down with Dan,
Okay. Okay.
for a consulting time, talk about whatever. Which then led to conversations about Disney, because that was my background. At the time, he loved Disney.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
today that love has worn its shine off a little bit. But he was, he talked
He did.
incessantly
He used to
about
talk about Disney all the time,
all
man.
the time.
Yeah.
Exactly. So now when, I would go to events, and he would introduce, select people in the audience, he included me in that introduction. And you got to see, and then we have some, celebrities in the office, and there's Dave and there's Steve, and oh, there's Vance, the Disney guy. You really got to get to know him. And I'm like, son of a gun, that was just so cool. And he'd
Yeah.
call me out on, on webinars and calls. oh, if you haven't talked to Vance, you need to do this, or if you're interested in this, um, and really did a lot to promote me. And whether it was intentional or genuineness of his heart, really did a lot for me. And actually, the entire part of my business that is the Disney trips came about at one of his masterminds. So I was
Wow.
sitting in a
Wow.
mastermind meeting with Dan, and we're going around the table, kind of telling people what we do and our background. And one of the participants, Dustin Burleson, it might have been Mike Crow, looked at me and said, "You know what? I would pay you to take me and my team around Disney." And I'm like,
Wow.
and Kennedy looks right at me and goes, "Yeah, there's your business."
Uh-huh.
And so I just ran with it. Now I'm doing 3 to 4 of those events every year.
Wow.
And if
Wow.
I had not been around Kennedy, I'd still be cleaning carpet.
Yeah.
Firmly believe that.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Wow. So, how many years ago was that, Vance, that you were in his mastermind group and that topic came up and he's like, "Well, there's your business, Vance."
That was 2012. So it's that 12 years
2012.
ago,
So what?
13 years ago.
That's yeah. Wow. Wow. And so now if I want to dig just a little deeper. So I want you to share, and I'm sure you'll be able to come up with a number of examples. And I love this Disney theme. And so if you look at your life, I want to, what is an example where you personally got to make a really substantial impact. Maybe it even surprised you in the moment. You're just like, wow, look at what just happened there. And I caused that to happen. And at the same exact time, hands down, that would have never happened if not for your relationship with Dan.
Um, well, certainly, I mean, my consulting practice would never have
Uh-huh.
happened.
Uh-huh.
Now, the outcome, I don't know so much that it would have had anything to do with Dan specifically, but if it wasn't for Dan, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. But I have two that stand out. So I
Okay.
worked with this dentist, and she was one of 7 dentists in the same building, not even in her town, just in the same
Wow.
building.
Oh, wow.
And so, she was a commodity. Dentist is a dentist is a dentist. There's only so many ways to clean teeth. You either you get the little squirty thing or the little brush thing, and that's it. Everybody takes insurance. Everybody pays the same copay. Yada yada yada. So she was just a machine, just cranking out patients. And she wasn't making a whole heck of a lot of money because insurance only pays so much. She had a lot of employees. She had a lot of headaches. I don't remember how we got connected, but so we did a brainstorming session, and I was trying to learn a little bit about her because I firmly believe in using your personality in your business because that's what's going to make it unique. And I discovered that her favorite movie was Peter Pan. And I said, I think we can use this. And I said, who makes the best patient for you? Well, what do you like? Women? Do you like teenagers? And he goes, no, I really like working with kids. I said, okay, well, how do you feel about just being a pediatric dentist? She goes, I think I would like that. Some of these old people, I don't want to talk to them. Okay. So we brainstormed, and she ended up becoming the pirate dentist. All right. So she
Okay.
took the Peter Pan movie to like the fullest extent, and she became a pediatric dentist completely. So she stopped seeing, once you hit 18, you had to go somewhere else. You couldn't see
Okay.
her anymore.
Okay.
So she started dressing like Captain Hook. I mean, she had the big wig, long black curly hair. The cleaning techs, or the assistants that clean your
Uh-huh.
teeth,
Uh-huh.
all wore Mr. Smee outfits. They walked
Wow.
around the
Wow.
office all saying "arg." She had a shipwreck as a like a little jungle gym in her waiting room.
Okay.
And she did a couple of, she had the floor painted to look like an ocean. And then the
Wow.
chair you sat in was a little rowboat. Um,
Wow.
Now, so that was now she did an investment, and she was over the top with it, but it worked for her. Now, here are the results of that. One, she stopped taking insurance and went 100% cash pay. her
Wow.
revenues went through the roof
Mhm.
because she could charge what she wanted to for this experience. It did not affect how many people she was seeing. She actually saw a few less, but she was making so much more because she could charge what she wanted to charge.
Yeah.
The other thing that hit her bottom line, just like a rock, was she was able to eliminate 2.5 positions because those employees, all they did was insurance billing.
Oh, okay.
$175,000 in salaries and benefits that she eliminated completely.
Right
That
to the
just went
bottom
right to
line
her bottom
profit.
line because she
Yeah.
no longer had to pay them because she didn't take insurance.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean,
Wow.
right there, and she's so much. So now she's hired. I talked to her. It was right around New Year, and she just brought in she hired 2 docs, and she just brought in a part timer, and now she works 2 or 3 days a week. When she wants to. She has 2 full timers and a part time dentist in the practice. They got 3 or 5 chairs now. They used to only have two. Um, and she's loving life,
Yeah.
absolutely loving life.
Yeah.
So yes, that was a incredible outcome.
It is.
Uh,
That is a phenomenal outcome.
that if I hadn't ever found Dan, she would never have experienced this kind of growth,
That's right.
or this
That's
kind
right.
of experience. And certainly
Wow.
I wouldn't have been a part of it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So I think you alluded to there was another one too that you wanted to share. If there was, I want to
Oh
make
yeah,
sure
yeah. If we have time, I'm more
yeah, we
so.
do we totally
Uh,
have time.
Completely opposite of a professional service. I had a client who owned a small string of service stations, like
Okay.
oil changes. So like a Jiffy Lube, Quick Lube kind of place.
Uh-huh.
And he was having the same problem. He was getting beat up by those guys because they would always advertise, coupon clippers, and every time they advertised a lower price, he had to lower his price to match them, and it was just a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
And as you know, there's no competitive advantage to being second cheapest.
No.
So he had to always cut his price. And, his employees were exhausted because they're just seeing this cars after cars after cars. Um, and so we got connected, and I said, so what's the problem? And he goes, well, look, we got Jiffy Lube and Quick Lube, up the street, and they do sales all the time, and it just cuts into my margins. I'm barely making any money. I'm working 80 hours a week. This is nuts. I said, all right, well, if you can't be the lowest price, let's stop going that direction. Let's go the other direction and raise your prices.
Mhm.
And he looked at me like I was nuts. And I was like, well, no, let's raise your prices. And what can you offer in the way of an experience and the way of added value that you could raise your prices significantly and have people really enjoy the experience? So we decided that he was going to be like a 1950s style service station, where like
Okay.
the 4 guys run out to your car. One guy squeegees the windshield,
Yep.
one guy checks the air pressure in your tire, another one opens the door for you. So that's what we had set up. They all had white shirts and bow ties, and one guy opens the door and puts the little cover on your chair or your seat in your car, and he takes you into the waiting room. And there's not like 3-day-old sterile coffee. There's actually a barista in the waiting room making your favorite coffee drink. And you'll never guess who the barista was. It was one of the oil change guys, one of the techs.
Wow.
He
Wow.
trained each one of his technicians to be a barista. So he had
That is
11
awesome.
employees, and every 11 days was your turn to be a barista. And
Uh-huh.
they all fought for it. They loved it because they weren't down in the oil pit. They just had to
Uh-huh.
make coffee that day.
Uh-huh.
So he's charging about 60% more than all of the other oil change companies. He's seeing a little bit less in traffic, which is fine. His employees aren't getting beat up. His employee retention is really, really gotten a lot better. People aren't leaving because they're not exhausted.
Yeah.
There's less wear and tear on his building. He's not exhausted because he's not working as hard. And by charging the higher prices, he's actually attracting a better clientele.
Yeah.
These
Yeah.
people are not complaining. They're here. They appreciate the little finer touches that he's providing.
Yeah.
Yes, it's an oil change. That is about as highly a commoditized service as you could possibly find. Is he using any kind of special oil that Saudi Arabia sent specifically to him? No. He gets his oil from the same place all the other guys get their oil from. He's just created an experience around it.
Yeah.
Now he added some other things to it. I just kind
Yeah.
of gave you the highlights. Um, but now he's able to serve less, make more,
Yeah.
and and he's
None of the
perfectly
other
happy.
oil changes places in the area are doing all that stuff and making your own making your coffee and all that. They ain't doing that stuff, you
And
know.
here's the crazy thing is that those other places know what he is doing
Yeah.
and they don't copy him.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And like my competitors, they all know what I do as far as carpet cleaning. They
Uh-huh.
all know the experiences that I provide, the gifts we give, how we enter the home. They know everything.
Yeah.
They don't copy us.
Yeah.
I mean, I did a price check in January. A few of our competitors were still 35% ahead of all of our competitors.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody, no, they easily copy what we do. Either they're
Uh-huh.
too dumb or they're too lazy. I don't know what the what the reasoning is, but you know, if you could just use a little bit of your creativity in coming up with ways to add value to your service in tangible or non-tangible ways.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
warranties and guarantees are the easiest way to add value to your product or your service because they don't cost you anything until somebody redeems it. And
Yeah.
if you got a great product or a great service, well, you don't have to worry about it because nobody's going to redeem it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a great value piece and you can charge appropriately for it.
Appropriate. Yeah, absolutely. That is some absolutely awesome examples, Vance. And so for anybody that's listening to this right now and thinking to themselves, dang, Kev, I really like Vance. And I love how Vance shows up and maybe they're even curious about this thing you do with taking folks to Disney and stuff. And maybe they'd like to experience something like that for themselves. How can people find out more about what you do? Any websites, any resources we can share with them?
Yeah, my main website is deliverservicenow.com,
Okay. Okay.
which is got a lot of stuff on it. But just created a hot sheet. It's what I call a hot sheet, which is 52 ways to wow your customers without breaking the bank. So
Okay.
essentially, it's 52 one wow a week of low cost or no cost ways that you can wow your customers from, just a follow up phone call or a handwritten thank you note, or, maybe you send them, some flowers or, a whole bunch of different ways that you can do it. And that way you have one wow a week that you can do for your clients. And you can find that at wow52ways.com.
Okay.
And that's
Perfect.
the one I would, if you want something that's like immediately actionable, just go to wow52ways.com and download that thing, and you're good to go for the next 52 weeks.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. Well, we'll make sure we include that with the show notes and stuff. And Vince, any last thing you feel led to share before we call it a wrap?
Yeah, I don't believe too much in sayings or mantras or anything like that, but I do have one, and that is you won't profit unless you implement.
That's
Um,
right.
so pick one thing that you heard today, whether it's on this podcast or something else. Pick one thing and implement it
Yeah.
and see the results that you get.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, we just kind of walked you through your treadmill or your drive home, and you listened to Kevin and I chatting. And it was a nice drive home. We got you home safely. But pick one thing that you heard Kevin and I talk about and go and try and implement it and see what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah. Yep, it's all about implementation for sure. That's how we grow. It's
Yeah,
you can read books and study all you want, but without the implementation piece, not much is going to happen. And
exactly.
so, yeah. Well, Vance, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation today. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate you, and I'm excited to get this out there and share it with a lot of other entrepreneurs. So, thanks so much.
Well, I appreciate you, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely.